For 6 years, I managed the firewall protecting 50 banking servers. Now you are letting me go because your cousin trusts free antivirus. Preston Barlow sat behind his mahogany desk. Yes, today, I placed my keycard on the polished surface, the small piece of plastic representing 6 years of sleepless nights, crisis management, and prevented disasters. Next audit, they will find out why. My name is Julian Vance, and until that morning in October, I was the Chief Information Security Officer at Apex Trust Bank, a mid-sized banking institution handling assets worth over $3 billion. My parents taught me that understanding people's struggles makes you better at protecting what matters to them. My mother cleaned houses and my father worked construction. They worked themselves to exhaustion for every dollar. That kind of trust, earned through competence and integrity, was something I understood. So when I entered cybersecurity, I never saw it as just firewalls and encryption. I saw it as protecting the life savings of people like my parents, who could not afford to lose a single paycheck to a data breach or ransomware attack. Apex Trust Bank hired me 6 years earlier, right after their previous security setup had been breached by a relatively simple phishing attack. They had lost customer data, paid significant fines, and their reputation had taken a beating. I spent the first months assessing the damage and rebuilt the infrastructure from the ground up. I implemented enterprise-grade firewalls, intrusion detection, penetration testing, security training, multi-factor authentication, encrypted communications, and secure backups. Within a year, we passed our federal audit with 0 findings. Within 2 years, we became the regional standard for community banking security. Within 3 years, the insurance premiums for our cyber liability coverage dropped by 40%. I was protecting 50,000 customer accounts, mortgages, business loans, and retirement savings. And Preston Barlow was about to throw all of that away for nepotism. The meeting where I was terminated lasted exactly 11 minutes. Preston had called me in at 8:30 in the morning. Human Resources was represented by Sylvia Cobb, who looked deeply uncomfortable. "Julian, we are making some changes to the organizational structure," Preston began, using that corporate language designed to obscure. "We are moving in a different direction. Your role will be absorbed into general IT operations. We have hired Colin Barlow to lead the department. He brings fresh perspectives on cost-effective security solutions." Colin Barlow. The last name was not a coincidence. "Your cousin," I said flatly. Preston's jaw tightened. "Colin has a degree in computer science and has been working in IT for 3 years. He is more than qualified. 3 years doing what exactly?" Sylvia slid a paper across the desk. "Your severance package, 4 weeks of pay, continuation of health benefits for 60 days, and a neutral reference. What is Colin's actual experience?" Preston stood up, signaling the meeting was ending. "That is not your concern anymore. Colin has innovative ideas about maximizing our security budget. He has identified significant cost savings we can achieve." "Modern solutions," I repeated. "You mean free antivirus software." Preston's expression confirmed it. "Enterprise security does not require the expensive systems you have implemented. Colin has done research. There are open source and free solutions that provide adequate protection for our needs. Adequate protection for 50 banking servers holding $3 billion in assets." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Preston, we are regulated by federal banking standards. The regulators require documented, tested, enterprise-grade security protocols. Free antivirus does not come with compliance documentation, service-level agreements, or liability coverage. You are violating 16 CFR, Section 314.4, the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act Safeguards Rule, which explicitly mandates that we maintain specific safeguards to protect customer information. Under 12 U.S.C. Section 1818.e, federal regulators can personally bar you from banking and impose massive civil penalties for unsafe and unsound practices or breach of fiduciary duty. Slashing our security budget by 85% and replacing enterprise tools with free software is a textbook breach of your fiduciary duty." He waved his hand dismissively. "Colin is confident he can meet regulatory requirements at a fraction of current costs. We are spending $600,000 annually on security. He can do it for $85,000. $600,000 protecting $3 billion in assets. That is less than 1%. It is a rounding error, and the last breach before I was hired cost you $4 million in fines, remediation, and lost business. Sylvia cleared her throat softly. Julian, the decision has been made. I looked at her, then at Preston. I could have fought it, could have escalated to the board of directors. But I had learned something in my 6 years there. Some people have to touch the hot stove themselves. When do you want me out? I asked. Today. Colin starts Monday. We would like a clean transition in 2 business days to hand over enterprise banking security. I stood and picked up the severance paperwork. I will need this reviewed by my attorney. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing, the next regulatory audit is scheduled for January, 4 months from now. Federal banking regulators do not accept ignorance as an excuse. When they find deficiencies, the fines start at $100,000 and go up. Colin is aware of the audit schedule, Preston said stiffly. Good. Then he knows what he is walking into. I handed my keycard to Sylvia. That little piece of plastic had given me access to the server room, the security office, and every protected system in the building. It had been my responsibility and my burden. Not anymore. I left Preston's office to pack my belongings. My time at Apex Trust Bank was officially over. I spent my last 2 hours at the bank compiling 6 years of security documentation into the shared drive. I included network diagrams, compliance checklists, and incident response plans, uploading it all with a clear note. Complete security documentation for transition. I also sent a list of critical implementation and audit dates to my personal email address, ensuring I kept no proprietary data. At 10:30 on Monday morning, Colin Barlow arrived for our meeting. He was 26, wearing an ill-fitting suit and carrying a leather portfolio. He had Preston's eyes and the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences. Sylvia Cobb brought him to my office to introduce us. We shook hands, his grip aggressive. I appreciate you making time for this transition, Colin said, his tone suggesting he was doing me a favor. Of course. I want to make sure the bank's security does not lapse during the changeover, I replied. We sat down and Colin pulled out a tablet. I have been reviewing the budget numbers, he began. $600,000 seems excessive for a bank of this size. My assessment indicates we can achieve the same security posture for a fraction of that cost. I looked at him. Have you worked in banking security before? I asked. I have worked in IT for 3 years at Cascade Tech Solutions, he said confidently. We manage networks for over 50 clients. I understand enterprise environments. I knew Cascade Tech Solutions. They were a small managed service provider that handled basic IT for local retail shops and dental offices. They did competent work, but they were nowhere near the complexity or regulatory requirements of banking. Banking is different, I said carefully. The regulatory framework alone requires specific security controls that general IT does not address. We are governed by multiple agencies and strict rules. Every security control has to be documented, tested, and proven effective. Colin waved his hand. Regulations are mostly about paperwork, he said. The actual security can be achieved with smart configurations and modern free tools. I have done open-source firewall solutions, free antivirus with enterprise features, and cloud-based backup services with free tiers. Preston and I calculated we can reduce security spending by 83%. So you are confident this meets federal standards? I asked. Absolutely, he said. Security is security. The regulators care about results, not how much you spend. That sentence told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to end. The regulators absolutely cared about methodology, documentation, and proven enterprise-grade controls. Results alone were not enough if you could not demonstrate your security posture was deliberate, comprehensive, and maintainable. But Colin did not know what he did not know. I have put all my documentation in the shared drive, I said. Everything you need is there. Security protocols, compliance checklists, vendor contacts, network architecture, and incident response procedures. Colin nodded, making notes. Great. I will review it all, but honestly, I will probably be implementing my own systems. Fresh start, new approach. The federal audit is in January, I reminded him. 4 months is not a lot of time to get your systems in place and document everything. These audits are mostly a formality if you know what you are doing, he replied. I managed not to react to that statement. The last audit had taken 2 weeks of intensive review. The auditors had examined everything from our encryption standards to how we disposed of old hard drives. It was not a formality. It was a comprehensive examination designed to protect the financial system. We spent another 20 minutes going over basic systems. Colin took notes but kept interrupting to explain how he would do things differently. I answered his questions directly and gave him access to everything. When he left, he shook my hand again. "Thanks for your time. I am sure you built a good foundation. I will take it from here." "Good luck," I said, and meant it in the most neutral way possible. By 3 o'clock, I had signed the severance agreement and cleaned out my desk. 6 years of my life was reduced to a cardboard box of personal items, a few framed certifications, a coffee mug, some reference books, and a small plant. Sylvia Cobb walked me to the lobby. At the door, she spoke quietly. "For what it is worth, I think this is a mistake." "Then you should document your concerns in writing to the board," I suggested. She looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. "I have to pick my battles," she whispered. I understood. Sylvia had a family to support and a mortgage. Standing up to the chief executive officer over a security decision she did not fully understand was not worth risking her job. That is how these things happen. Not through malice, but through ordinary people making rational decisions to protect themselves while someone in power makes a catastrophically stupid choice. I walked to my car carrying my box of belongings. It was a clear October afternoon, with leaves turning gold and red in the trees lining the parking lot. I felt strangely calm. I had done my job right up until the moment they took it away. I had documented everything, offered warnings, and provided a complete transition. What happened next was not my responsibility anymore. I drove home to my apartment, a modest 2-bedroom place where I had lived for 4 years. I had been saving aggressively, living below my means, because I understood that job security was an illusion. I had 8 months of expenses saved, and unemployment would extend that to over a year if needed. I was not worried about finding another job. The cybersecurity field had far more openings than qualified professionals. My resume included managing security for a $3 billion financial institution with perfect audit results. I would have offers within weeks. But first, I wanted to see how this played out. I spent my first 2 weeks of unemployment updating my resume, reaching out to colleagues, and taking interviews. The cybersecurity market was highly active, and my experience managing information security for a $3 billion bank with flawless regulatory audits was in high demand. Within 10 days, I had multiple offers. I chose to accept the position of Chief Information Security Officer at Evergreen Community Bank, located 2 states away. They offered better compensation, comprehensive benefits, and most importantly, a board of directors that explicitly understood that robust cybersecurity was a necessary investment rather than a drain on profits. I scheduled my start date for early November, giving myself a 2-week break to decompress. During this transition period, I kept in touch with Chloe Dalton, a senior systems administrator at Apex Trust Bank. Chloe was talented, diligent, and had been a key ally of mine during my tenure. She began texting me about the rapid changes Colin was implementing. On Monday of his first week, Colin gathered the IT staff to explain that enterprise firewalls were a corporate scam. He announced plans to migrate to an open-source firewall by the end of the month. I advised Chloe to document every single meeting, instruction, and decision. I told her to keep a personal log of her objections to protect herself when things went wrong. According to Chloe, Colin moved with reckless speed. Preston Barlow celebrated him as a financial genius, presenting his cost-cutting measures to the board as a major success. In his first 30 days, Colin slashed the bank's security budget by over 60%. He eliminated the enterprise firewall maintenance contract, which saved $200,000 annually. He canceled the intrusion detection system subscription, saving $90,000. He terminated the security awareness training program for employees, saving $40,000. He ended our external penetration testing contract, saving $50,000. Finally, he uninstalled our enterprise-grade antivirus software and replaced it with a free version, saving $75,000. While these numbers looked fantastic on the bank's monthly financial spreadsheets, they created massive security vulnerabilities. Colin was removing the critical layers of defense I had spent 6 years establishing. He was saving thousands of dollars, but exposing billions of dollars in assets to severe risk. By mid-November, I had settled into my new office at Evergreen Community Bank. One Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Chloe, and her voice sounded strained. "Julian, something is wrong with the network," she said quietly. "Everything is running incredibly slow, and the latency is spiking. Colin says it is just high traffic from a marketing campaign, but I have never seen patterns like this." "What kind of patterns are you seeing?" I asked, a sense of dread settling in my stomach. "We have unusual outbound traffic," she explained. "There are consistent, large-volume data transfers going to external Internet Protocol addresses that do not belong to our vendors. Because Colin disabled most of our monitoring and logging systems to reduce server overhead, I cannot get detailed session logs. But my instinct says we are losing data." "Did you show this to Colin?" I asked. "Yes, I did." Chloe sighed. "He told me I was being paranoid. He said the free antivirus program would have flagged any malicious software. He actually told me that your old systems had conditioned the team to be jumpy over normal, routine network activity. He refuses to investigate further. Unusual outbound traffic and consistent transfers to unknown external addresses in a financial network almost always pointed to data exfiltration. An external actor had likely breached the network and was systematically copying database records. "Chloe, you need to protect yourself immediately," I warned Chloe. "Document everything you are seeing. Take screenshots of the traffic graphs. Copy whatever basic logs are left, note the timestamps, and send all of it to your personal email. If the bank is compromised and Colin refuses to act, you must have proof that you raised the alarm and were ignored. Otherwise, you will be the scapegoat when the disaster becomes public." "This is so frustrating," Chloe said. "We never had these kinds of issues when you were running the department." "I understand," I said, "but you cannot save a company from its own leadership. Just document the evidence and keep your head down." After we hung up, I sat looking out the window of my new office. I felt a brief impulse to call Preston Barlow directly and warn him about the exfiltration. But I knew how he would react. He would accuse me of being bitter about my termination and trying to undermine his cousin. He had made his choice when he threw away 6 years of expert protection to save money. Some corporate lessons can only be learned through catastrophic failure. 3 days later, on Friday morning, I received a text from Chloe consisting of a single word: locked. I immediately called her back, and she answered in a whisper from a stairwell. "Ransomware," she said, her voice shaking. "It hit us early this morning. Every database, every application server, and every desktop computer is encrypted. There is a message on every screen demanding $5 million in cryptocurrency. The branches cannot operate, customer accounts are inaccessible, and the main website is down. It is absolute chaos." "What about our backups?" I asked. "We had air-gapped copies." "Colin moved the backups to a free tier of a cloud storage provider to save money," she explained. "But he configured the storage path incorrectly. The cloud backups were mounted as active network drives on our servers. The ransomware encrypted the backups along with the primary data." I closed my eyes. It was a classic avoidable error. Isolation of backups was the most fundamental rule of ransomware defense. Colin's incompetence had left the bank completely defenseless. Chloe continued to describe the panic unfolding in the executive offices. "Colin is in Preston's office right now," she whispered. "He is arguing that we should pay the $5 million in cryptocurrency immediately. He wants to keep this quiet and avoid telling the regulators or the public. He thinks we can just restore the files and pretend nothing happened." "That is a massive mistake," I told Chloe. "Under federal banking regulations, Apex Trust Bank is legally obligated to report any major breach or security incident to the regulators within hours of discovery. Trying to pay a ransom and conceal the incident from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency is not just compliance failure, it is criminal cover-up. If Preston goes along with this, he is risking federal prosecution. Make sure you do not touch any payment systems or participate in any conversations about concealing the breach." "I cannot help them, Chloe, but you must keep yourself safe." We ended the call, and I monitored the news. Despite Colin's attempts to hide the crisis, a local reporter received a tip from a branch employee who was frustrated by the offline systems. Within 12 hours, the story was on the local news. Within 24 hours, it had become a major industry headline. The bank was forced to shut down all operations and hire professional forensic investigators to assess the damage. The forensic report, which was later leaked to the regulators, was devastating. The investigators discovered that the attackers had not just deployed ransomware. They had been inside the network for over 2 weeks. Because Colin had disabled the intrusion detection system to save $90,000, the hackers had been able to scan our systems, find vulnerable servers, and systematically copy customer databases without triggering any alerts. The entry point of the breach was a simple phishing email sent to a loan officer. When I was CISO, we had enterprise email filtering that blocked such messages, but Colin had replaced it with a free email service that lacked adequate protection. Once inside, the malware spread easily because Colin had disabled automated security patching, claiming it disrupted business operations. The hackers had exfiltrated the personal financial data of over 50,000 customers, including social security numbers, bank account numbers, mortgages, and credit histories. The total scope of the compromise was massive. The regulatory response was swift and uncompromising. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation launched joint emergency examinations. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's Cybercrime Division took control of the system logs. Apex Trust Bank was facing millions of dollars in federal fines, multiple class action lawsuits from compromised customers, and a public relations disaster that threatened its banking charter. 3 weeks after the ransomware attack, the board of directors held an emergency meeting. They voted unanimously to terminate Preston Barlow for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. Colin Barlow was fired on the same day. Sylvia Cobb was reassigned to a minor role, and the board brought in a crisis management firm to oversee the bank's survival. The following morning, I received a phone call from Edward Finch, the chairman of the board of directors at Apex Trust Bank. "Julian, I am calling to apologize on behalf of the entire board," Edward began, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "We were not consulted when Preston made the decision to terminate your contract. He did it unilaterally, using his executive authority. It was a catastrophic error in judgment." "I appreciate the apology, Mr. Finch," I replied. "But the damage has been done. We want you to come back, Julian," Edward pleaded. "The board is willing to offer you the position of Chief Information Security Officer reporting directly to us. We will triple your previous salary, increase your security budget, and offer you a comprehensive benefits package. We need someone we trust to guide us through this regulatory nightmare and rebuild our entire security posture from scratch. Name your terms." It was a tempting offer. There was a certain professional satisfaction in knowing they realized my worth only after experiencing the exact disaster I had predicted. I could have gone back as a savior, dictating my own terms. But I had spent 6 years trying to convince Preston Barlow that cybersecurity was a fundamental necessity, only to be cast aside for his cousin. Evergreen Community Bank valued my expertise from day one. "I cannot accept your offer, Mr. Finch," I said calmly. "I have built a strong security team at Evergreen, and the leadership here supports our initiatives. I cannot return to an environment that had to collapse before it valued basic security protocols." There was a long silence on the line. "I understand," Edward sighed. "Can you recommend someone who can help us?" "I can recommend 3 consulting firms that specialize in breach remediation, forensic investigation, and regulatory compliance," I said. "They will be expensive, but they are competent and will tell you the absolute truth about what needs to be done." I sent Edward the contact details for the consultants, then hung up the phone. I felt no joy in their collapse. 50,000 innocent customers had their identities stolen because of Preston's arrogance and Colin's ignorance. It was a tragedy that could have been avoided with a simple standard security budget. Our industry was built on trust, and Apex Trust Bank had broken that trust in the worst way possible. Shortly after declining Edward Finch's offer, I contacted Chloe Dalton. She was still stuck at Apex Trust Bank, working 80-hour weeks to help the external consultants rebuild the ruined network. She was exhausted, demoralized, and deeply worried that she would be blamed for the breach. I told her that Evergreen Community Bank had an opening for a senior cybersecurity analyst. Chloe sent me her resume, and I forwarded it to our human resources department with a strong recommendation. She passed the technical interviews easily and accepted our offer 2 weeks later. On her first day, we had coffee in the break room, and she looked like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you for getting me out of there, Julian," Chloe said. "It was like trying to clean up a hurricane. Preston and Colin ruined that bank. You warned them, and they still did it." "Some people have to learn by failing," I told Chloe. "You did your job, you documented your objections, and you protected yourself. That is all you could do. Here, we actually have the budget and the support to do things the right way." In the months that followed, the full consequences of Preston Barlow's decisions unfolded. Federal prosecutors launched a formal investigation into the breach, focusing on how a regulated financial institution could be so easily compromised. Because I had documented my warnings in writing, and Sylvia Cobb had kept records of the termination meeting, there was clear evidence that Preston had knowingly disregarded security standards to cut costs. The regulators utilized 12 U.S.C. Section 1818.E to permanently ban Preston Barlow from ever serving as an officer, director, or employee of any federally insured financial institution. His career in banking was over, and he faced massive civil penalties. During the court hearings, board members testified that Preston had hidden the regulatory calendar and falsified reports to show compliance. He ultimately pleaded guilty to criminal charges and was sentenced to 2 years of probation and fined $500,000. Colin Barlow faced multiple civil lawsuits and was permanently discredited in the technology industry. The financial toll on the bank was catastrophic. The total cost of the breach, including forensic services, customer notifications, credit monitoring, regulatory fines, and legal settlements, exceeded $40 million. Apex Trust Bank lost 30% of its deposit accounts within 3 months as customers fled to competitors. Its stock price collapsed by 67%. Realizing the institution could not survive, the board of directors agreed to sell the bank to a larger regional competitor at a severe loss. Apex Trust Bank ceased to exist as an independent brand. All of this destruction occurred because a stubborn chief executive officer wanted to save $600,000 on security. A year and a half after my termination, I was invited to give the keynote address at the National Banking Security Conference. The audience consisted of chief executive officers, board members, and security directors from across the country. I structured my presentations around 3 core principles. First, security is a business enabler, not a cost center. Trust is the foundation of banking, and security is what protects that trust. Second, expertise matters. Cybersecurity is a specialized field, and treating it as general IT is a recipe for disaster. Third, organizational culture determines security outcomes. If leadership dismisses concerns and prioritizes short-term savings over risk management, failure is inevitable. I chose to address the Apex Trust Bank situation directly but professionally as a case study. I explained how an institution with $3 billion in assets collapsed because leadership treated security as an optional expense rather than a core requirement. During the Q&A session, a regional bank CEO asked me how board members can verify if their security advice is sound. I told him they must verify compliance audits, request independent penetration testing, and ensure their security team has direct reporting lines to the board rather than being filtered through the CEO. The presentation was highly regarded, and many executives told me it changed how they viewed their security budgets. The regulators even used Apex Trust Bank as a landmark case study, issuing new guidance that required boards of directors to maintain active oversight of cybersecurity risks. Julian Vance, the boy whose mother cleaned houses and whose father worked construction, who learned that protecting people's trust was a sacred duty, ended up influencing security practices across the entire banking sector. The lessons from Apex Trust Bank's failure made the financial system safer. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well, doing excellent work, and letting the consequences of incompetence play out. If you found this story valuable, consider subscribing. We share real accounts of corporate actions and their natural outcomes, proving that expertise and integrity always matter in the end. Your support helps us continue bringing these stories of accountability to light. Our community is growing toward 8,000 subscribers, and we appreciate every person who stands with us. Thank you for listening, and remember that protecting trust is always worth the investment.